Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast where today Toby and I are going to be reviewing everything that we learned from the first game week back in the Premier League. It's good to have the football back, it's good to have the Premier League back. How did you find the weekend, mate?
Yeah, great. It's so good to have the Prem back. I mean, we've had a lot of football over the summer, but you just can't beat the Prem, can you? Get the big boys back. A lot of teams changing. A lot of teams looking like they're going to be pushing up there, and of course the start of the FPL season as well, which matters most. How about yours, mate?
Yeah, it was good, thank you. It was really nice to. I really like the fact that they have the champions on the Friday night. It's nice for them to have their own separate game and the whole day, and it's kind of the end of the working week as well, so that's nice. And it's been really nice just to watch the amount of games that are on TV at the moment, especially living in the UK. There's not as many as you maybe expect, and I think we just had so much to talk about. I mean, we watch preseason, you can't try and figure out how these teams are going to set up what they're going to do. And until you really get to the competitive games, you don't really know. You kind of hope and you expect that maybe they'll do this. But now, with points on the line, and from the first game week, we're already taking up loads of conclusions based on what we've seen. And you're going to start us off, aren't you, with the Arsenal Man United game?
Yeah, and we're going to start off with my team, Arsenal, which on this weekend was a bit of a strange one. I think the fan base is a little bit split in terms of being glass half empty and glass half full. And that's why for that first point, I've gone for Arsenal, won like champions, but they also struggled like a team not in full flow just yet. And it's difficult to judge on the first game of the season, I think, when you get a win like that they did. I think if this was, in the last sort of 10, 5 games away at Old Trafford to get a 1-0 like that, I think the Arsenal fans would be absolutely buzzing. You just want the points at that stage. Whereas first game of the season to go away to Old Trafford is a really, really strange one, and it felt like one of those end of season problems. It didn't feel like the players felt particularly fresh, like they were really up for it, like things were flowing and setting up the season. So I can definitely understand why there may be some sort of negatives to take away from that performance. And I think when you look at the stats as well, that really do show that Arsenal should have a lot more to offer than they probably did on Sunday, despite getting 3 points.
They, I agree. They definitely could have played better than they did. I think Man United were the better team, and actually would probably come away from that game a little bit disappointed they didn't at least get a draw, especially considering how the game went. But for me, I think what's the story, especially doing this channel, doing the podcast on a regular basis. The story is if Man United win a game against Arsenal, first game week back after having a horrendous season last year out, finishing 15th, losing the Europa League final, that's the story. And actually, the fact that coming out of this weekend, that we're maybe more talking about Liverpool, United doing well, City looking amazing, and the conversation about Arsenal isn't that strong and that heavy, despite us talking about them first, I actually think is a positive for Arsenal because if Arsenal don't win that game, then immediately everyone's going, well, Arteta's finished second 3 years in a row and he's bottled his first game. They've got tough fixtures coming up. So I actually think that win the game no matter what. I think you can say that same sentence for every other team this game week. Win the first game because you don't want to be losing it. You don't want to be dropping points. And so while I understand what you mean, because especially the attacking players, I thought they looked a bit leggy, which is something like you said, you'd expect at the end of the season, not at the beginning of it. They didn't really have the same energy, but also maybe it was zapped out of them because Man United played really well and the crowd was really behind the team. So I think you need to caveat everything, and I think if it persists over several game weeks, I don't want to be too reactionary in my analysis of any of the teams so far, but I do think that winning the game was most important, and especially before Man United, who did look good, get onto a run of winning games and performing really well, and then playing them in 5 or 6 game weeks time, that would be a completely different story. So just win the game, and I think you know what, you can't have too many complaints.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with it being at Old Trafford. And Arsenal's recent record at Old Trafford is really poor when you sort of look back over the last 15, 20 years. Very rarely picking up wins there. I mean, we have more so in the recent years, but just historically, it's been one of our toughest places to go to and get a result. And like you said, with this really tough fixture, the first 5 or 6 games, I think there is going to be a few of these Arsenal performances where you're looking at Newcastle, City, Liverpool, really, really tough games coming up. And it's almost like I don't think Arsenal are going to get into that flow until a little bit later in the season because of that fixture schedule, that they can't come out straight away and play really high attacking football. They need to be a little bit more conservative, like you said, and get that win under their belt. And just to look a little bit add it a bit deeper, yeah, in the second half, only 34% possession for Arsenal. An XG overall of the whole game, if you take away the goal, of only 0.4, considering the goal I think was 0.91, 0.92, so super high, and their only sort of real key chance in that game. But as you said, a solid start, especially defensively. Some good things to take away. I think the defence were good. I think Raya was very, very good when United were attacking, and United were on good form. So they did well to see that game out and get those 3 points. And that's why, in quotes, like they say, champions go out and win games even if they don't play particularly well. So it's something to build on there.
Yeah, I remember looking at the fixtures when they first came out, and I think Opta Stats had it as the most difficult start of all 20 teams in the Premier League for the first 7 games of the season. And I do think it's one where if Arsenal can just win the majority of the games, maybe draw a couple, depending on the circumstances, they can get themselves into a really good position. And then you can look at the fixtures after that and go, wow, we're still in the running. We're still maybe a couple of points off, maybe first, who knows. And now we've got these easy run of fixtures. That I think that'll make a massive difference. I have to ask you though, in terms of talking about new things that we learned about the new striker up front, Victor Gyökeres, what did you make of his performance? Obviously, he didn't get a goal, didn't get an assist, and a lot of people are obviously piling on a lot of pressure on him because he is the big money signing. He's the one that's supposed to, quote unquote, fix your attack. What do you make of him in his first performance, and were you worried at all by what you saw?
I definitely wasn't worried. I think it's a really difficult game to judge him on because it felt like I don't think Saka had a great game, especially creatively. I think Martinelli was pretty ineffective most of the game. Odegaard was really the only one who it felt like was pulling the strings at times, and he just didn't really have much to work off. And he's not... I think his link-up play is good and his creativity himself is good at Gyökeres, but he's not like a Kai Havertz where he's going to drop in and really make some moves himself. He does need to rely on the creativity of others to get in those opportunities where his most valuable attribute is his finishing and that play when he gets into the box. But being the player who's less likely to sort of pick it up and carry it there himself, it's a difficult game to judge him on. Yes, he didn't really do too much, but I don't think many other players really brought him into the game either. So still needs a couple of games, I think, to really look deeper.
I think that's a very fair assessment. And we should probably talk about Manchester United. We have hinted about them already in the Arsenal analysis, but is there something that you learned in particular from Man United? I think for me, it was the fact that they're definitely going to be a better team this season than they were last season.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think the headline to take away from that one is that United's attack looks completely reinvigorated. I think they were fantastic at times, really, really good. And it felt like it was the first, well, not the first time, but one of the first times under Amorim that you could really see that attacking system that he is trying to build and that he built at Sporting. Looking specifically at Cunha and Mbeumo, I was really, really worried when they were on the ball, when they got the ball in those dangerous positions, when you had Cunha driving forward and Mbeumo cutting in. It was really scary, and it hasn't felt like that from United for a while. I think the improvement that they've had in terms of the quality of those attacking options is tenfold to what they had last season and the season before. And you can feel that it's not just them who have improved the team, but the impact that they've had on other players as well, with the way that they play, with Cunha and Mbeumo driving inside. It gave Dalot and Dorgu and Amad Diallo when he came on as well, when they were holding the width, so much more room to work, so much more room to get forward really wide. And I think when Šeško comes into that side and is pinned right up on there on the number 9, there's going to be even more space for them to work in. And I think for a first game of the season, and to have potentially one of your toughest home games of the first of the season, I was really, really impressed with Man United. Such a good performance for them to build on.
Well, it's not just Arsenal who have really difficult fixtures in the opening first few games. It's also Manchester United. I mean, Arsenal, yes, they've lost, but they've also got, I think, Liverpool, Chelsea and Manchester City coming up soon as well. So it is important that they also get off to a good start, especially considering the pressure that Amorim would be under because of how bad last season went. And I think I completely agree with everything you said there. I think they look completely different. And even despite the fact that they lost that game, everyone's talking about Man United in a really positive way. And that's not the expectations and where Manchester United need to be and as a club where their standards are. But that is good because you're re-engaging those fans who felt lost last season, who weren't excited to go to Old Trafford, who weren't thinking that they might score loads of goals. And all of a sudden you're seeing Cunha picking up the ball, flicking it around the corners and picking up the one, driving at defenders and skinning the entire Arsenal defence and before getting away a shot. And Mbeumo, who looks like he's going to be a great outlet for them, and every time he's out on that right hand side, Bruno Fernandes can find him the ball on a sixpence. Mbeumo can then run with the ball as well. I think Mbeumo had a slightly worse game than Cunha, because I think considering the time and space he did have on the ball, I think he should have got more shots away and created more attacking chances than he did, and that was a little bit disappointing. But all in all, the whole team in general just they look like they've got weight lifted off their shoulders, because last season was so bad that you kind of momentum works for you in a bad way as well, and now they can just start afresh. And like I said, you can see the vision that Amram wants, and it's a really exciting side. Although Dorgu at left wing back was really, really good, after just 6 months of being in the Premier League, you still forget that, he's so young as well, that he looks like an established Premier League left wing back, and he could be a really important part for what Man United need. Obviously, defensively, they still got some deficiencies. Bender in goal. The back three, I think, did okay. Luke Shaw in particular, I think, was the highlight, but also Lenny Yoro, how young he is. He's only going to get better, and that's really exciting as well. So many positives to take away from Man United. Just unfortunate that they lost the first game, and the fact that it was to Arsenal. But if you're going to lose a game, it's going to be to one of the title challenges or potential title challenges. I don't think you'll have too many complaints at the moment, but the future does look very, very promising.
Yeah, and I think even defensively, they restricted us to a very small handful of chances, and I think a lot of that was the way that they were playing and how good their attack was, that they were just keeping the ball up there, and when they did lose it, they were pressing really, really well, and they had a really good structure to prevent Arsenal having the opportunity to break against them. And I think that was probably the worry. If you look at their lineup, you've got some really attacking wing backs. You've got Bruno dropping into playing like a double pivot with Casemiro, and when Fernandes was drifting forward, it felt like there must be an out for Arsenal to sort of expose how many players they're putting forward. But there just wasn't that opportunity. Any long balls, the defence, I think, dealt with pretty well. They did press and prevent Arsenal playing out too much. And they kept their ball in and around there. 22 shots overall with 15 in the box, which I think is a big change, especially with United. At times it felt like their attack was so stale, and there was none of that final ball and those final touches and sort of resorting and shooting from distance potentially at times. Whereas they were patient, strong, quick. Yeah, it's a really, really good start for United, and there was a lot of talk over the summer about how they are going to be better this year, and I think based on that, they certainly will be better than last year. How good they could be this year, time will tell, but it's exciting.
And next week they go away to Fulham, and all before the ball is even kicked, you may be going to that fixture thinking, oh, that could be a banana skin, are they going to get 3 points? Now I think you go into that game and previewing it and thinking United probably are going to be favourites, and you wouldn't be surprised if they scored 2 or 3 goals. And I think once Cunha and Mbeumo, and then obviously Sesko as well. But I'm glad that he wasn't chucked into it, because he is still a very young lad. I think it's easy to forget he's still only 22. But once they get their first 3 goals, once they get up and running, yeah, they could look like they're going to be a very dangerous team going into this season. We move on then to Liverpool, and they were the Friday night game, as I mentioned in the intro, and it was nice to see a really exciting 4-2 game, one that was end-to-end, really high intensity. But it did cause me some concern about Liverpool's defence. And so my thing that I learned about Liverpool was that they need to shore up the defence if they're going to be winning the league. And I know a lot of people, especially online, have been talking about the money that Liverpool has spent, the money that they still potentially may spend on this team. And people are talking about how because they won the league last year, that automatically means that they're going to win the league by a huge margin, especially if they get Isak this season. And I don't think that's a sensible take to have, because you need to analyse how the players work together, the combinations that they have, the link-up play, how it works, and you've got different profiles that need to work together. And I saw that defence, and you saw it against Crystal Palace in the Community Shield, and you saw it against Bournemouth, and there's a lot of similar things, and I think it's fine for now, because there's still game week 1, there's still time to sort it out, but it's something that does need to be sorted out. So in particular, I think the fact that the 2 centre-backs in Konate and Van Dijk, both of them have got their own new fullback they need to work with in Kerkez and Frimpong. Both very attacking, both like to bomb up the field. And defensively, it does leave them a little bit exposed. We saw for the second Bournemouth goal, the fact that it was just Konate and Van Dijk against 4 Bournemouth attackers, and that's far too many. And it wasn't even Frimpong and Kerkez at that point. It was Gomez and Robertson who were all in the box. Also, the fact that there's no Ryan Gravenberch, who I think is a big miss in both of those games. The fact that having him there to break a play in front of the 2 centre-backs is really important. And whilst the boss can be there alongside McAllister. The thing is, though, Szoboszlai was losing the ball in very dangerous areas, actually. And if he was doing the stuff that he's trying to do 10 yards further up the pitch, it becomes less of an issue because Bournemouth then have to travel further to get to Liverpool's goal. But a bit deeper, he needs to learn. And all in all, I think it's still, a good start for Liverpool. 4 goals scored in the first game, 2 goals scored against Crystal Palace, but still 4 goals conceded in both those games. And that's just a little bit too much, especially if we want to go on to be Premier League champions.
Yeah, and like you said, I think in terms of when you're talking about teams' defence, that consistency is something where it's so important. And with those sort of attacking units, you can change players and you can sign a few players and I think bring them in like Man United did have done with Cunha and Buemo. But I think with a defence, to change 2 out of 4 of that back line all at once, it's going to take time to adjust. And I think Kirkers and Frimpong are definitely good enough to be defensively reliable, even though they are more known for their attacking assets. But it's learning a new system and like you said, sort of partnering with new players, partnering with the centre back next to them, like you said, and also the midfield and the winger in front of them. They need to sort of get that communication and get that tracking, make sure spaces are covered when they need to be. Because when Bournemouth were countering, like you mentioned, I think that was where the issue was, where if you had somebody like Semenyo just running through the middle of the pitch, there's not quite those experienced players maybe, and those players who know each other really well, being able to spot a situation and know exactly what to do straight away. There's probably that little bit longer that it just takes some of these new players to get that. And especially if you haven't got Gravenberch in there and you've got Szoboszlai, who's a completely different player. Perhaps maybe the lineup was just a little bit too attacking this week and not quite the balance that was needed.
Yeah, and that's the worry. It's how do you go about finding the balance? Because Liverpool have got so many good attacking players now and you're trying to fit them all in. But you might have to sacrifice a few in order to get the balance defensively, because attacking will win you goals, but the cliche is defense will win you league titles. So all of a sudden you're thinking about the 4 midfielders in Gravenberch, McAllister, Wirtz and Szoboszlai, and they're all starting midfielders. And so you're going to rotate them, you're going to have a lot of games. But when you come up against Arsenal in 2 weeks' time at home, which 3 are you going to play? I mean, based on the evidence we've seen so far, you almost have to play Gravenberch. McAllister is Liverpool's best and most important midfielder from last season. And then you're thinking Szoboszlai Wirtz and thinking, well, Denis Szoboszlai is off the work rate and he is good going forward as well. That's not a knock on his attacking play. But then also you spend all the money on Wirtz and he is world class, but he maybe isn't quite up to speed just yet. You're trying to figure out who you're going to play and you're not quite sure. And it's a good problem to have probably if you're on a slot, but one where you are going to leave some players out and they're probably not going to be happy about it, because last season we knew who the 11 players were going to be. And if there was an injury or suspension, you knew there was about 14 players that honestly really trusted they were going to come in. Now, and again, it hasn't happened, but especially if Liverpool signed Isak, with Akatika doing so well, it is one where questions are going to be asked about what the best starting 11 is, who's going to be playing, are those players going to be happy? But you have to find that balance. It's so important. If I think if Frimpong and Kirkes can find their feet and can start playing really, really well, then I think that will basically sort out the entire team, and then Liverpool could be really unstoppable. But it's also the fact they need to keep them fit, because the reason why Arne Slot revealed in his post-match press conference that Frimpong came off for Endo was because of the fact that he felt a bit of a hamstring. He felt his hamstring in training prior to the game, and so with Conor Bradley already out, you don't want to risk losing him as well. And then the fact that it had to be Endo that came on, because Joe Gomez wasn't fully fit after only having 2 training sessions after just coming back from an injury. And then the fact that you have to play Kirkes because Robertson doesn't have the legs. It's still game week 1. We're still learning new things about these teams, how they're working with each other. But there's still lots of pieces of the jigsaw that Liverpool and Arsenal need to figure out before going into what's going to be an excruciating season, because Liverpool are a very good team. They're going to be playing a lot of games, and it's important that they can be defensively solid as well as going forward, because in terms of going forward, they seem to have it sorted, so that's not a worry at all.
Yeah, and they still might even have Isak coming in by the end of the window, so just to throw another piece of the puzzle that they've got to somehow try and fit in and shuffle around, and I'm sure they can make it work, but it just might take a little bit more time than maybe it did last year. Another team that have, well, can you call it an issue if you've got too many good players, trying to fit those teams in, trying to fit those new signings in, is Manchester City, who came away with a 4-0 win over Wolves on the weekend. And I think we learned this week that Man City look as ruthless and as efficient as ever. A really strong performance from them. And as I said, a really efficient performance. They only had 4 shots on target and 4 goals and an XG of 2.47 XG. And it wasn't just their shooting and their finishing that was so efficient. It felt when they got those goals, they didn't waste any time. They didn't waste any touches. And we saw that really free-flowing, quick attacking football from Manchester City that maybe dropped off and was maybe a little bit stale at times last year. And I think some of the names that they brought in over the weekend as a starter really helped with that. You're looking at Oscar Bobb, who I think was really, really good. Reinders had an amazing debut. You couldn't have asked for better from him. And as well to have Haaland back in consistently with a little bit maybe more confidence going into this new season, considering how City performed. They looked really, really strong, and that's exactly what they would have wanted to start the season, really.
Yeah, going into the game, I thought to myself that Man City were going to win it. It was just about how well they were going to do, who they're going to play, how they're going to click together. And then watching that game, I started to feel a bit foolish, thinking about how everyone's been talking about Liverpool and Arsenal. And then you think to yourself, City will be there, but maybe they've got a few deficiencies. And then you look at that game and you go, what deficiencies? Where are the deficiencies? Especially, I thought when we were planning for the pod that you could have had this whole section just about Tijani Reinders because he was that good. In terms of talking about Premier League debuts from midfielders, now that's got to be up there for one of the best ever. I mean, the way he beat 2 men and then dinked the ball to Rico Lewis for that first Man City goal, the way then he scored a goal himself, and then the way he assisted it, he had absolutely everything in that game, and I think he was undoubtedly my man of the match for that game, considering the fact that Haaland still scored 2, and by the way, Haaland's back as well. But I thought Tijani Reinders, I mean, him, Nico Gonzalez, and now Rodri as well, when he does come back, and hopefully for Man City, when he does come back, he can find his form as well, because it has been a long period of time that he's been out. But all of a sudden, to not having a midfield last season, that wasn't good enough, that didn't have enough legs in it, to now you're looking at that midfield and thinking to yourself, wow, that's going to take some beating on a weekly basis. And I mean, Reinders has everything. He's basically Gundogan on steroids, because he's also more physical. He's also got more running power. Gonzalez is baby Rodri, and then you've got actual Rodri as well. Cherki, Foden, I mean, that's without even mentioning Bernardo Silva and Ilkay Gundogan themselves. Nico O'Reilly came off the bench as well. That is a scary Man City side, and I know it's only game week 1, but I think it's one where maybe they've been overlooked so far in terms of predictions going into the season.
Yeah, and like you said, with their deficiencies, it didn't feel like, oh, okay, they're attacking really well, but there's a chance the Wolves are going to get in there, get in behind, get on a long ball. It didn't really feel like that for most of the game, and it felt like City really covered the space over the top well, stopped Wolves playing out with a really strong press from their attack and midfield, and it was just a pretty complete performance. And I think by the time it got to the second half, City were even able to take it down a gear, slow it down, sit back a little bit more and play a little bit more conservatively, which I think was good to see as well, and something that they didn't really do at times last year, and I think that's where a lot of their defensive problems came from. So an overall really, really good performance, and to be able to get, like you said, those new boys in and performing so quickly is just going to speed up that City momentum that we sort of wait to happen in the season. Didn't really feel like it happened last year, and normally it's happening around sort of Christmas time into January is where they really step up. Whereas if they can build on this from now, it could go from now with some of these new boys in the team. So
they definitely have a point to prove, and they played that first game as if they did have that point to prove, because there was a lot of talk about how bad they were, the deficiencies. But I mean, if you think about the players that didn't even start that game for City, and then also the players that didn't even come off the bench, I think Gvardiol was injured, and Gundogan, Akanji didn't even come off the bench. They were Marmoush on. How are they letting Savini potentially leave the Spurs? I don't even know. Marmoush didn't start that game. I mean, they've got so many talented players, and they've got 2 players for every single position. And whether it's City, Arsenal, Liverpool, it's going to take some winning the Premier League this year against those other boys as well. And God, I mean, maybe you don't doubt Pep Guardiola. I would say that if it wasn't for the fact that Pep was at City, I would have said that, no, okay, I don't think City are going to win because it's just too much change. But maybe actually going to the Club World Cup helped them, because those new players, when the majority of them were bought quite early on in the transfer window, they're able to gel in and kind of get used to the squad and play semi-competitive games depending on how you want to view the Club World Cup. So maybe if anything, that's helped them. And with the depth in the squad as well, that means that they'll be able to rotate and they can start well and then finish the season well like they normally do as well. And that's honestly a frightening thought.
Yeah, exactly. It's having that little head start of the Club World Cup is certainly because it could have taken a few games. Could have taken a few games to find that rhythm that it feels like they've already found.
Yeah, and another team who I learned a lot about this game week was Sunderland. One of the newly promoted sides who, you know what, in my predictions video I had all of them going down. I will still go with all of them going down, but honestly, my takeaway from Sunderland 3, West Ham United 0 was that Sunderland have the ability to stay in the league. I'm not willing to go as far and say they will now stay in the league just based off one game, but they definitely have the ability, and I think that's a lot more that you can say than some of the previous sides that come up in the last 2 seasons. I think last season it took till October the 5th for a newly promoted side to win a Premier League game. Sunderland done it game week 1 against West Ham. And I'll caveat this with saying it's the first game of the season. Obviously a West Ham side that not a lot of people have a lot of hope for going into the season. That it was at home, so the fans were up for it. They still had hope and optimism. But actually the way that Sunderland played is what gives me a lot of optimism for why they could stay in the Premier League. The fact that they only had 37% possession, about 36 in the first half, 38 in the second half, means that they're not trying to go toe-to-toe in terms of playing the ball out of the bag with possession and trying to engineer chances by dominating the first third before then getting a player overload in the final third. They're just trying to play to their strengths, be a little bit more pragmatic, and it worked so well. I mean, I was really speculative about the goalkeeper Ralph's, the fact that he's 22, but he made 4 saves in the game, 4 solid saves, and I think it was a really good performance by him. I really liked all of the defenders. I thought they were really compact, but on the ball as well, they were composed, especially Mandava at left back, who obviously was at Atletico Madrid, so you would have hoped that from him. I think the midfield linked the defence and attack really well. And then the front three of Talbib, Mayenda, and Adingra, all of them were absolutely phenomenal. The 2 wide men keeping the width, stretching that West Ham defence, and then obviously Mayenda in the middle being an absolute nuisance, running off the back of the West Ham defence. All the goals were great, a little bit low on XG, and the fact that they were all spectacular goals, and I think the third one especially was maybe an error from Hermanson. I'm not taking anything away, Sunderland fans, don't hate me, but it is still early days. It is still just one game against a side who you expect to struggle. But that was a really impressive performance, and one that you have to take notice of. You can't just ignore it and say, it's one-off. You have to take notice, and I think my learning is Sunderland could stay in the Premier League. Do you think that's fair? Do you think they could also stay in the Premier League based on that one game?
Yeah, I think even if you take away the performance from Sunderland, and with that caveat that 3-0 was maybe, I don't know if it's harsh on Wolves or flattering to Sunderland. They certainly deserved to win the game, but yeah, 3-0 is a really strong statement. But I think to take that 3-0, that is huge statement. Take that confidence that they get from that game and go into the next ones is massive. Even if they played terribly, just to have a 3-0 win at that first game back is huge. And to top that with the fact that they played really well, they looked really solid, they had a really good structure. And against West Ham, who, yeah, they are struggling. I don't think we expect them to have a great season, but they are organised, they are under Potter, and they are in an interesting system, which I think is something that is really, really good to see from them, that they've clearly sort of done their homework on West Ham specifically as well. It's not just like they're completely going to sit back and park the bus in every single game. They know their opponents they're coming up against. They know how to play them and they know how to exploit them. And that was something that I think we could really see on the weekend as well. It wasn't just a fluke win. You could really see the work that they'd put in for that game as well.
Yeah, you could see the wing-backs of Wan-Bissaka and Diouf trying to press the full-backs of Sunderland really high up and trying to press them and win the ball back. But then actually Sunderland played the ball really well by keeping them 2 midfielders, the 2/8s, higher up to then create a space in the midfield, and they were just bypassing it every single time. And then once the 2/8s got the ball, then the 4 players they were off. They're running away from the ball, waiting for receive the ball wide or behind the back line. And every time they got behind West Ham, it looked like a really dangerous situation, and West Ham were just in a mess, really. And it's harsh because I want to focus on how well Sunderland played, because they played exceptionally well and above and beyond what I thought they were capable of doing, and I'm really excited to see how they do in coming games. But also West Ham played terribly, and you could almost have that as its own other learning, that West Ham played terribly, and I feel really sorry for the fans who made the trek all the way up from London to Sunderland. But that's what supporting your team is. Sometimes they do well, sometimes they don't, and at the moment West Ham are not doing so well. And I also wanted to highlight the fact that the players that didn't start for Sunderland, and it highlighted to me that their recruitment this summer, while it has been a lot and they spent a lot of money, you probably need to do that in the Premier League. And they have players like Enzo Lafay, who was so important for them in the back end of the second half last season. Isidore was on the bench. He came on and scored the third goal. Chris Rigg was an important player for them last season. And Gueye, who they signed on loan from Chelsea, was also on the bench. So not only is the first team really good and performed really well, they look like they have options on the bench, players who can come into that first team and perform as well. And there's really no negatives for Sunderland fans. I think maybe cautious optimism is the very least you can take. But I think the maximum you can take is Sunderland could stay up in the Premier League. I think that's a very valid point based on this game, because based on what we've seen previously, a newly promoted side shouldn't be doing this. And I think next up they have Burnley as well. And if they can win that game as well, really hammer their relegation rivals in West Ham and Burnley, and then also give themselves the confidence of 6 points from the first two games in the Prem, that could go a really long way. And I think sometimes for a newly promoted side, belief is just half the job.
Yeah, and that transitions quite nicely, I think, into the next point of the weekend, and that was Spurs v Burnley. It's a little more Spurs focused. That it felt like Spurs are shifting away from the madness that we saw under Ange Postecoglou and transitioning towards a little bit more control under Thomas Frank, which I think is much needed, and I think will be much celebrated by Spurs fans, particularly in the Premier League. I think in those knockout competitions, as we saw how fantastic they were in the Europa League, that Ange ball can work. I think over a 38-game season, you need things to be a little bit more controlled, a little bit more conservative, and a little bit more sensible. And I think Spurs' performance over Burnley was really complete. I think they started off by naming a really solid 11, it felt like, and a really sensible 11 with quite a conservative midfield of Gray, Bergvall, and Sarr. And I think there was still good balance there. We can see Sarr and Bergvall like to pick up that ball and drive it forward when they can, but they're two players who are defensively good as well, whereas under Ange we may have seen Kulusevski and Maddison play in those 2/8 positions and essentially leave that 6 all to themselves, all on their own. And I think you've got somebody young like Archie Gray in there. That's exactly what you don't want. Frank identified that, gave him some more defensive support, and essentially just allowed the attackers to sort of run the attack as opposed to needing loads of support by that midfield when you've got players like Kudus and Johnson who are happy to pick up that ball and run from those wide positions in. You don't necessarily need to play 2 10s like Ange did. And I think that was really sensible from Frank, and I think that's how their system is going to look this year. Completely dominated the game, really. 2.3 XG to Burnley's 0.9, 2 big chances to 0, and 70% possession in the first half, with 67% overall. So a good attacking performance, a 3-0 win, but also signs that they're improving from things that they struggled with last year.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think Thomas Frank was a great appointment for Spurs because his ability to get the best out of his players and his team, I think, is going to really benefit the Spurs side. I really like the fact that it works well because Johnson and Gray were 2 players that I think he wanted at Brentford as well. So the fact that he clearly has a very similar eye for talent that the Spurs recruitment team also have, I think is going to really aid them well in terms of the style of play. I also like the fact that I think we're maybe seeing a transition from this is my philosophy, you have to play it no matter what, every single game, regardless of the situation, and a bit more pragmatism, but also it's about finding the balance, and I think that's what the Spurs side could really be going forward. I think they have really exciting players. I mean, the fact that Solanke didn't even start the game is Richarlison, who played this game and the Super Cup as well in midweek against PSG, and did really well in both games, scoring 2 on the weekend. It's one where they've got players who with different profiles, who can suit different occasions. And Thomas Frank is more than capable of enhancing the quality of the squad by improving the players, signing players with the recruitment team to better aid the weaknesses and fill those voids. And I think this is a side that could really go far. I mean, the fact that Vicario was taking free kicks from near the halfway line, a bit like Flecken did for Brentford last season, and it was causing Burnley a lot of trouble as well. I think it's something to not shy away from. If something's effective, use that to your advantage. That means you've got a strength over your opposition, and maximize that, exploit it, and then use that to hopefully get you goals and attacking chances. So I really like Thomas Frank at Spurs. I really like the performance against Burnley, one that you expected them to do, especially considering they're a newly promoted side. And I think, yeah, it looks really, really positive. I mean, the performance against PSG was really encouraging. Shame they threw it away late on. But I think this is the start of something potentially really, really good.
Yeah, and it's easy to say that, it's a newly promoted side, it's Burnley, they're expected to win. But Burnley's defensive record last year was absolutely exceptional. And that's what Burnley played on at the weekend. They did sit back and they said, come on then Spurs, let's see what you've got, let's see what you can do, relying on their defence. And Spurs were still able to bag 3 goals against them. That's no easy feat. I think a lot of teams are going to struggle against Burnley's defence this year, whereas Spurs have come in game week 1 and taken the ball by its horns and just walked away with a really, really encouraging win. And it's a similar case to Sunderland, where it's a team with a lot of change, a new manager, a lot of new players, and to have the momentum that can build from that 3-0 win is just as important as the 3 points themselves.
Yeah, the future looks really bright for Spurs. We'll go on to the next team, and the one I was covering. And I was covering the Chelsea Crystal Palace game, the 0-0. And I've got to be honest, I was a little bit disappointed with Chelsea because of the fact that a lot of people have been talking about them as dark horses going into this season for the Premier League title. They did really well towards the back end of last season, winning the Conference League, winning the Club World Cup against PSG, and what was a fantastic performance. And coming into the season, a lot of people as dark horses. But against Crystal Palace, a very good Crystal Palace side who won the Community Shield against Liverpool, I thought it was going to be tough, but to not win, and I thought they were a bit lackluster in attack, especially considering the fact that they had 1.6 XG from 19 shots. I think they should have done better. I don't think they had really any clear-cut chances, and I think that actually was built up because of the volume of shots they had rather than because of they had 3 or 4 big chances. And so for me, the thing that I want to focus on Chelsea and what I learned was, I think from the back, the progressive passing is a little bit weak and a little bit tame. And I think a big part of that is not having Levi Colwill. They say you only miss a player most when they're out injured. And I think on the ball, Levi Colwill is a massive, massive loss. I think the amount of times that you saw him get the ball, he would then stride out from defence very slowly, and then you draw an attacker from the opposition before them playing the pass. And then that would start a Chelsea attack. Without him there, it did look very slow and lackluster to the point where the way in the second half of the game when they were going for it, how Chelsea were attacking was long balls out wide to the right or left channel, and that's not really how I imagine Enzo Maresca's Chelsea side, how they want to play. So I think that was a little bit disappointing. But also, the fact that they didn't have Tosin as well, and Maresca talked about him in his preview to the match, talking about how if you don't have Colwill, then Tosin's a player who could do the job the next best. Well, he didn't have him either. And then I think about if you want to compensate for not having Tosin or Colwill on the ball, you really want Romeo Lavia, because when Enzo Fernandez and Moses Caicedo were dropping deep and picking up the ball from the back line, they were doing it, but they didn't really have the passing to then break the lines of the Crystal Palace defence, who were pressing really, really well. And then actually that invited Palace onto them even more, causing them even more trouble and got Palace into the game. So it is one where, all in all, Chelsea, it's still early days, and it's one where they're still building. They've still got a very young squad. But without key players in key areas, I think Chelsea will struggle. And for me, it's passing out from the back is not as good and not as progressive without Levi Colwill, who they desperately missed.
Yeah, and I can imagine in that game that not having those progressive direct passes from their central defenders to their number 10 like Cole Palmer has just reduced his effectiveness in that game, and how important he is to that Chelsea side can't go understated. Whereas if you've got centre-backs being a little bit slow, a little bit sluggish, a little bit safe on the ball, the likely chances that those passes are either going to be, as you said, long balls out to the wingers or short passes out to their fullbacks, who then have to try and work something into Palmer. Whereas if you've got a player like Colwill who can pick up that ball, look up and see, even if it's a small gap, and an opportunity to pass it into Palmer directly, he is going to make that, because he knows the risk even of that pass of not making it is potentially outweighed by the reward of getting it to Cole Palmer in a good position, who can then spin, play it in through your wingers, play it into your attacker, or run with that ball himself. And And maybe having that and not having those sort of midfield cutting passes from the defence kept Palmer out of the game, because it did seem like he had a little bit of a quiet game, and it feels like when he does, Chelsea do overall, really.
I go so far to say it wasn't just him, though. I think Palmer, yes, is the talisman, and stopping him stops a lot of what Chelsea try and do well. But also, Jamie Giddens, I don't think had a particularly good game. I don't think João Pedro had a particularly good game. I think Neto probably was one of the best attackers who started, but even then it was just an okay to good game. I don't think it was anything spectacular. I think Delap did well when he came on, but it was to the latter stages of the game, and Chelsea were going a lot more direct at that point, which suited Delap as well. But yeah, I mean, to be fair, I thought Esteval looked really bright when he came on, but he's still very raw and still very young and has a lot of hype and potential behind him, but it didn't quite work out in terms of getting a goal or doing anything decisive in the game. So I think it's one that Enzo Maresca is going to have to address. He's talked about potentially Chelsea need to go out and buy a centre-back before the end of the transfer window, which I'm inclined to agree with. I'll be honest. I think that could really hurt them going forward over the course of the season, especially if Tosin's not fit as well. I thought that Chalobah and Achapong did well defensively, but going forward, and it's weird to say, but that is how the game's gone. You need centre-backs who can also play with the ball, progress with the ball. We think about Saliba, Van Dijk, Canate, Gabriel, I think is quite underrated at Arsenal on the ball, and Ruben Dias, Stones, all of the Man City centre-backs. I think if Chelsea are going to be the dark horses and go for the league as well, that centre-back partnership needs to improve. Well, they definitely need to have one. I don't know how they're going to go about doing it. Maybe because they put Reece James at right centre-back. I'm not sure I particularly like that. I'm trying to think of the other options. I don't think Badiashile or Disasi are good enough really to be in that Chelsea team. Yeah, it's definitely going to need to be fixed, because I think without it, Chelsea definitely could not win the Premier League this season.
Yeah, I mean, there's still 2 weeks left of the window, and the way that Chelsea have spent and have been able to spend, there's certainly a possibility for some more from them, for sure. We'll just need, like you said, they need somebody who is great on the ball and is confident in making those passes. But I think with Chelsea's recruitment policy as well, they like to sign young players. So they need to find a balance in there that's going to come in and be able to do a job straight away, by the looks of it, really. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that one, see what can happen.
Yeah, and another key takeaway from the weekend for me was Nottingham Forest are here to stay. After beating Brentford 3-1, I was watching that game and thinking, do you know what, this is a really good side. And very similar to Sunderland versus West Ham, where I thought, are they good or is the opposition not that great? And I thought, no, actually, Nottingham Forest were really good. That midfield of Sangare, Anderson, Morgan Gibbs-White, we raved about it a lot last season. That is such a good midfield. I mean, I still can't believe, I love Elliot Anderson, you know this, and I still can't believe that hasn't been picked for the England squad yet. And it's one for me that I think he will and should be in that England squad come the World Cup, because I think he's a phenomenal player. I mean, the pass for Chris Wood's third goal I thought was absolutely phenomenal. Morgan Gibbs-White for the second goal for Dan Ndoye's one. I mean, the fact that he was on his right foot, spinned around, went and chipped the ball into the box with his weaker left foot. I thought it was absolutely outrageous. And then Chris Wood his movement in the box is still there. Yes, he's still going to be turning 34 over the course of the season, but I think he's still going to be the focal point for Forest. I think he's still going to be the main man up front, and I think I'll be very surprised if he doesn't get at least 15 goals going into this season. Plus the fact that defensively they were really, really good as well. Brentford didn't have too many clear-cut chances. They scored a goal from the penalty. That was unfortunate, the fact that Sangare handballed it, and he did handball it in my opinion, and that maybe ruined the clean sheet and ruined my FPL points as well. But I think Forest are a very good side, coached by a very good manager, and potentially it's premature to say they're going to go anywhere. Maybe Europa League will have some sort of impact with the amount of minutes games they're going to be playing over the course of the season, but I think it's one where Forest could be here to stay.
Yeah, I think that's when the true test will come for Forest, will be that Europa League. And I think going to the season, the early stage of the season, for me personally, there was no expectation that they were going to drop off quickly. I think it is going to be something that's over the whole season if they do, because they do still have a really good, healthily sized squad as well that can certainly be rotated in the cups when needed. But yeah, the quality they have in the starting 11 is ridiculously underrated still. Defensively, I think, really unlucky to not get a clean sheet in that first game. So I think their back five is one of, as a whole back five unit, I think is one of the strongest in the league. We saw that last season. We saw that in the game at the weekend against Brentford, who, yes, have been as opposed to Nottingham Forest, who have been consistent and kept that squad over the summer. Brentford have been torn apart a little bit and are looking like a completely new look side who may struggle this year. But Nottingham Forest still came out and did a fantastic job and a really comfortable win by the end. So yeah, they're still certainly one to keep an eye out on this year, and I think will still be a team who are pushing up and challenging those big boys at times.
Yeah, especially when you consider the fact that it's only been Anthony Elanga really who's left that side, and him going to Newcastle for 55 million, I think it is in the end, signing Dan and Doy for a club record fee. But really, in terms of one in, one out, I mean, have Nottingham Forest got a good slash better deal than Newcastle? Maybe, because I think Dan Doy is a really good player, but I also think Elanga's a good player. So depending on the fee, might be one we'll have to wait and see. But I think only losing Elanga and then reinforcing that squad as well with the signings that they've made, I think Forest are very well placed. And it's one where we've been talking about recent years about Villa, Newcastle breaking into that Champions League, breaking the mold. Forest looked like they could have been the next one to do it last season. It kind of fell off, but I don't see why they couldn't. I don't necessarily think they will go going into the season, but this game against Brentford really highlighted me that, yeah, I think they could definitely be a top 10 side for the foreseeable future, and the way they're going, the way they're performing, I think is incredibly encouraging. And if they can keep their midfield together, I mean, they kept Morgan Gibbs-White with that situation, whatever that situation was, and Elliot Anderson coming along like he did, and Ibrahim Zangara, who had injury issues last season. Hopefully he can stay fit as well, because he looked immense breaking up play. If they keep that squad together, who knows what Forest could do over the course of many seasons.
Yeah, and I think one of those sides that they will be challenging to move on to our next point is Brighton and Hove Albion. I think they'll be sitting in similar positions around the league. One of those clubs that's really trying to build. As impressive as Nottingham Forest were over the weekend, it feels like for Brighton that maybe they are still facing the same old issues after a 1-1 draw to Fulham and conceding a late equaliser in the 96th minute. Absolutely brutal from Rodrigo Muniz. And there's two real main issues that it feels like in why Brighton dropped from 3 points down to 1. I think the first of those is, again, their lack of ability to hold on to a lead. Defensive lapses in defensive concentration, it feels like. Not particularly great game management. I think there's maybe a lack of leadership and a lack of consistency in their backline and midfield that we've seen over a few years. Lots of changes. We saw De Kuiper come in for his debut today. We saw Weaver play. And they're just, again, a lot of changing in the side. And I think that's something that this season they need to have a regularly starting backline, because they don't look like a solid unit at the moment. I think we saw that in the last 15-20 minutes of that game. It was really exposed. And then on the other end of the pitch with Brighton, there still feels like they're lacking a real number 9 and somebody who's really gonna lead the line for them. I was expecting it to be Danny Welbeck this weekend, who I think is good enough potentially for now, but we saw Rutter play there, who isn't a conventional 9, is certainly more of a false 9, and not somebody who's gonna consistently put the ball in the net for them. And I think that's something that Brighton should have done in the game. They should have got a second goal. They had more than enough possession and more than enough potential chances created, but one, they struggled, I think, to find that final pass at times, and two, they really struggled to finish those chances when they got them. So yeah, this definitely should have been a game where Brighton picked up 3 points, but it's now 2 dropped.
And that's the thing with Brighton, because I don't think there's any pressure on them to chase Europe year in, year out. And I think that's a goal, and I think that's something they should strive for and try to achieve. But at the same time, I just think they're very inconsistent, and I think that's something that going into the season I really wanted to see them stamp out, because when they go 1-0 up, if you score 2, then all of a sudden it makes it even harder for them to come back, especially a side who haven't signed many new players over the course of the summer, who are sticking with the same group of players so far. Maybe they're a little bit undercooked, and maybe you can get the initiative on them. Maybe it's a good time to be playing the first game of the season. But then to drop the points, and especially the way they did, how late on they did it, it just feels very deflating. It almost felt like a loss, I'll be honest. And I really want to see them be consistent over the course of the season, because I think in previous years they've always started really well. Now that they've drawn in the manner that they did as well, it's a little bit disappointing. And Yeah, I think they have the quality to be going for Europe consistently, but it's just will we see it? I don't know. But I still think that Fulham under Marco Silva are a really good side, and they're a side you can never really count out. So I think I'm glad for them that they got the point. But yeah, I think with Brighton ironing out these inconsistencies, and if they can get a striker, it feels like for a few seasons they haven't had a striker. If they can get a striker in the last few weeks of the transfer window, maybe they won't. Who knows? But I think that would go a long way to helping them really achieve their goals and really strive for improvement next this season.
Yeah, and that's what at times that I find really frustrating with Brighton is in terms of those 2 points, like their defensive sort of concentration at the end of the game. To counter that, Brighton still play out the back absolutely superb. Those defenders are so good at playing out the back, and the way that they do that as a system is exceptional. And at the other end as well, in terms of like a striker, I think Rutter is a really, really good player and brings so much to Brighton and creates so many opportunities for them, even off the ball with his runs and the way that he plays and holds himself. And the way that they attack at times is so good. There's just these few minor issues that they've had for maybe 3 or 4 years now that still haven't been addressed. And I feel like that makes it even more frustrating because they should be better than they are, despite the fact that they are probably already much better than they should be. And it's difficult because maybe fixing these issues as well will make them weaker in the areas that they excel in. But it feels like they should at least give it a go to try and fix a few of these little issues that seem to be holding them back at times.
Yeah, and then we'll move on to the last thing that I learned from this weekend, and it's something that I already knew, but something I was hoping was going to improve and hasn't quite, and that's that VAR still sucks. When the season ends, I really hope that the refereeing committee and VAR and the FA, they all get together and they go, what was bad last season? How can we go about fixing it? And I think that's one of the things that actually led to one of the first errors. And the first thing that really annoyed me was the Liverpool Bournemouth game because it's the opening game of the Premier League season. Everyone's watching it, and 13 minutes into it, the referee and VAR already have a clanger. And then you go, that's not a great start. And that's when, in the 13th minute, Liverpool won on a counter attack from a Bournemouth corner. Mo Salah plays the ball through to Ekitike, and he's the last man along with Senesi. Senesi gets there first. The ball bounces up and hits him on the arm. That's not a handball, and I think that's a correct decision. But as the ball deflects off him, it goes into Ekitike's path, and then Senesi reaches out and tries to claw the ball away. He makes contact with the ball, meaning that Ekitike can't get there, and how that isn't a straight red card is absolutely beyond me. And I think why it wasn't picked up was because of the fact that they were trying to be quick about it. They're trying to not over-analyze and over-referee, and that actually meant that it led to an error. First game of the season, so early on in the game. Then the second one which annoyed me was the Chelsea Crystal Palace incident where Eberechieze had the disallowed goal for the wall and for the fact that Margay was too close to the wall. And apparently the rules are that when there are three or more defenders forming a wall, an attacking player must be at least 1 meter away until the ball is back in play. And apparently this rule has been a thing since 2019. And if you go back and look, as I have done, and try to look at highlights of free kicks that are scored, I think every single one a player is within a meter of the wall. And so the fact that it happened this time just makes absolutely no sense to me, because then later on in the game, the referee actually marked out 1 meter either side of the wall. And I just thought to myself of last season with Arsenal and the time wasting and constantly getting yellow cards, I don't want this to become the thing of the beginning of the season where teams are now too close to walls and then goals that go in as a free kick then get disallowed and then they have to be retaken. And I just think they've set a precedent in the first game week and it's going to be an absolute farce and every team's going to take advantage of it. You're going to have players appealing that players were too close to the ball when the goal's gone in. I think they made a rod for them back. And the last one was the Saliba challenge against Mateus Cunha in the Arsenal Man United game. For me, that was a penalty because Saliba's standing, he goes to ground, and he gets Cunha and then doesn't get any of the ball. And I just think to myself, how is that not a penalty? And if it happens anywhere else on the pitch, I think it's given. So those were three that I spotted personally, which I thought were absolute clangers. And for me, yeah, football is back, but also VAR being bad is also back.
Well, I think this might be a first on the podcast, Mev, but I actually don't know if I agree with you on all of that. I think the Eberechieze free kick, it has been a wall, and I definitely remember seeing walls being marked out in terms of it being a meter away, especially when teams try and put their own wall in front of the other player's wall. I've definitely seen that marked out, and I think that's a difficult position where, yes, maybe things in the past have been a little bit more lenient and they've gotten away with it. Does that mean it shouldn't be ruled out this time, even if it is in a breach of a rule? I'm not too sure, and I feel like if it is a rule, they kind of have to stick to it. But I do definitely agree in the sense that now that they have done that, they are going to have to do it for every free kick, and I think it is going to become a farce. And how much impact does it actually really make? I don't necessarily agree with the rule, but I don't disagree with the decision, I would say, this time. But maybe give me a few games and I get sick of more invisible foam coming on the pitch, then maybe that would be a different matter. The other two, I think Ekitike's was... I'm not sure if they gave it, maybe because they weren't sure if it was a red or not. But I think if the referee had a clearer view and had seen that in the live, I think he would have sent him off, and it would have been 100% of being a last man. That one I'm not too sure on, and maybe on the last one I'm being a biased Arsenal fan, but I don't think that was a penalty. I think it was pretty soft, and I think like it was mentioned in the weekend, if it was one that was given live, you could probably see it. If it was one that they overturned and gave, I think that would have been pretty harsh. It felt like Cunha was almost off balance already as he touched the ball, and it felt like Saliba maybe got just enough of it, and it didn't directly go through Cunha for it to be a penalty. So yeah, I kind of half agree with you on a few, and yeah, the Arsenal one, I just wanted us to win, so maybe not.
I mean, the one with the Chelsea one, I think based on the rules and the laws of the game, it was the referee did the right thing. What I would argue is that it's probably not a good rule to have in the first place, because of the fact that a few years ago, obviously, players were pushing into the wall all the time, and that was probably not right. But then I think they've overcorrected it too much. Like, surely it should just be like, you're not allowed to touch the wall. So even if you're right next to the wall, you're not allowed to touch them whatsoever. I think that's probably a better way of implementing it than just saying you have to be a meter away. I think the Liverpool one, I don't get it, because there was clearly something there. You could see the change of direction of the ball, but then also Liverpool didn't even get a free kick. So there's no red card. There was no foul given for Liverpool. It was just... the foul was given the other way, I think, as well, for something else that happened off the ball. So I don't agree with that. And the United one, yeah, I think that's 50-50. But at the same time, the fact that VAR didn't really look at it too long either. I don't want time, because of the fact that it takes so long to make these decisions, I don't want that to impact if the referees get it right or wrong. And I just think first game week, I really want to talk about the football and the fact that I don't think it's been a good week for referees already. I think just, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of referees. I think they could do a much better job than they do, especially considering, to quote Rokeane, it is their job.
Yeah, I think that's such an annoying thing with VR, isn't it? That, yeah, they in the past they've taken far too long for decisions that still haven't ended up in the right place. So maybe that's what they're thinking this year. Just like, well, we spent 5 minutes doing it last year and we were still rubbish and got it wrong. Let's just at least save the fans time a bit. But then that's just ultimately going to lead to more mistakes as well. So it's a bit of a lose-lose, and there must be a happy medium somewhere. Maybe. I don't know. I think now that they've got VAR as well, they've kind of made their bed. They're going to have to lie in it and try and find the best solution. But yeah, it didn't feel like any of the decisions were confident this weekend, whether they were right or wrong. It didn't feel like there was any confidence there still either.